Welcome to Muslims and Mental Health with Sister Heather, a groundbreaking program looking at mental health issues through the biopsychosocial spiritual paradigm.
Welcome to another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. This month of August, we're looking at episodes having to do with back to school issues, and particularly today, we're going to look at nutrition. We're going to look at why nutrition is important, how food and mood can affect you, and how you can prepare your children for a great year nutritionally. And I'm going to be joined today by our guest, Shireen Hakim. But first, I just want to mention a couple of facts that we know in the world of psychology about food. So we know from a study from Sanchez and Villegas, who's looked at a Mediterranean diet, that food can directly impact lowering depression. And so we have empirical evidence that shows that food can affect your mood. And so I want to turn now and talk to Shireen Hakim. Shireen Hakim is a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and best-selling author in Southern California. Her work is referenced by Loma Linda University and My Halal Kitchen. Here is a copy of her book. It's called Meatless Protein Cookbook, Easy Recipes to Help You Lose Weight and Live Longer. So please join me in welcoming Shireen Hakim. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So with this particular episode, we're looking at food and children and good nutritional habits and going back to school. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you why food is important to our mood.
Well, food directly affects our mood because it provides the nutrients that are responsible for our mood. Mm-hmm. So, for example, our brain, its sole source of fuel is from food. It's glucose. So if it's not fed glucose, then it can't function. And that's when you get in that mood of tiredness, cranky, and even anger. And there are specific nutrients that can lead you to be in a good mood, such as tyrosine, omega-3 fatty acids, and vitamin B12. And on the other hand, food can be detrimental to your mood if you eat foods that have too much of, some foods can be bad for you, such as too much sugar, or if they have too much caffeine or too much chemicals. Mm-hmm. These foods will lead to, they just give you a temporary burst of energy, but then you'll quickly crash and you're left cranky and tired. Mm-hmm. And these foods can be, you can get dependent on them because you need more of them to get to that same level. Mm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, we talked about this a little bit in our last episode about eustress and distress. Mm-hmm. And how the food can affect. Right. And I'm just thinking that, coupled with sleep deprivation and, with the improper foods, it just makes one irritable child.
Right. And you can think, next time you're going to eat, you can literally ask yourself, what am I in the mood for? Because the food is literally going to affect your mood. Wow. Mm-hmm.
And so how can good nutritional habits affect a child's time in school?
Well, can definitely help positively affect their performance. There's a direct correlation with children. Most importantly, as long as they're eating regular meals, continuous meals. So, as long as they're eating enough and feeling satisfied, it'll lead to improved mood, performance, concentration, and interaction with others, with their peers and with their teacher.
Mm-hmm. And so what would good nutritional habits look like for children and teens, and what are your recommendations for them?
There's a few. You want to make sure they're having, like I was saying, regular meals. So always having breakfast, always having a lunch, always having dinner. Children need snacks in between meals to keep them going. They do need real whole foods. Home cooked is best. Mm-hmm. So, and I would say to concentrate on getting them enough servings of the fruits and vegetables and the dairy sources. If you concentrate on those are nutrient dense, mm-hmm. and then they'll be sure to be able to have the best nutrition. And the other sources of food will automatically, be included in their diet.
So when you talk about homemade foods, because with many parents having, both parents working and having two jobs and lack of time, we see kids often getting like Lunchables and prepackaged foods at the store, and you're obviously advocating for homemade foods, which is different.
Right.
But are there any that you can recommend that are sort of easy to make or fast to make, where parents could take those baby steps toward making that food? Because I think sometimes parents see it as, I just don't have time to do it.
Right. Yeah, definitely. That is one big problem that happens, is a lot of times we're doing fast food for kids, or the packaged foods. And one thing with kids is they eat well when the food is simple, like a single item, finger foods, mildly prepared. So that's the good thing. You can make a simple, quick meal. It doesn't have to be something elaborate. So even in terms of a healthy sandwich with whole grain breads, with some lean protein, maybe peanut butter, those are very quick and easy to make, easy for the kid to eat. Something like maybe beans, which you can easily prepare on the stove, doesn't take long, some rice, that kind of thing. I always like to recommend preparing the meal the night before, perhaps. So maybe making sure breakfast for the next day is ready the night before. And perhaps in the morning, you can start your slow cooker, and then dinner would be ready when you get home from work. So,
not to belabor the point, but I just want to ask you, because I know as a parent myself, sandwiches were easy. But then as schools started the no peanut policy, and then you didn't want to get processed meat, and then it's like, what do you have, left? I guess you have vegetarian sandwiches maybe, but
right.
Are there any other options?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think they can still do almond butter, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know, actually. Maybe.
I think they can, and almond butter, I prefer almond butter to peanut butter. It has a little bit more protein. It is a little easier on the stomach. So you can definitely try that one. You don't want to buy the processed deli meat, but you can get like a roasted chicken. You can take out pieces of it. You can do like a hummus sandwich. I actually love doing hummus pizza, so I actually have it in there. Okay. But so you can spread like hummus on like a pita, and that can be the sandwich with some lettuce and that kind of thing.
That sounds like it could be fun for the children.
Exactly. Yeah. And kids like to eat more when they help in preparation, so.
Okay, great. So what are common errors parents or caretakers make with nutrition? We talked about a couple just now. But how can they support their children in nutritional choices or making good choices for them?
Right, like we were saying, I think the time crunch is a big one. So feeling we don't have enough time to make food, so we're kind of grabbing fast food, processed. So keep the children's food as a priority, and carve out some time to prepare something for them. It won't take long. It can be quick. There's some easy to make items. Another thing is having the children involved in the meal, letting them choose the foods in the grocery store, and what do they want to eat when they're at home, because children are they are independent. They like to gain independence. They like to make choices, and that will ensure that they're more likely to eat eat their meals. So a lot of times parents want to kind of say, okay, here, this is what you're eating, and kind of force them. And then of course there's usually like a struggle, but you'll find if you encourage the child, oh, you helped me cook the eggs this morning, or oh, what we go shopping, oh, what fruits and vegetables do you want? Then they have that empowerment, and they're involved, and they're more likely to eat. And so,
one question that pops into my head that, as we're talking, is one complaint I've often heard from parents, which is, I would really like to feed my children more nutritionally or better, but they believe anyway that they can't afford it. And what do you have to say about that?
Right. It is hard because ideally you do want as much organic foods as you can to avoid the pesticides and the hormones in the food. So I agree. I understand that. I would say to look for the farmers markets. Every town has a farmers market on the weekends or on a weekday. They will have lower cost produce, things like that. If you go to stores that sell things in bulk, like a Winko's, a Costco, something like that, larger quantities will be less. So maybe you can buy your milk products there, your butter, things like that. Again, things in bulk, you can buy your beans. Beans are a very good source of protein, fiber. You can buy a larger size of bag of beans, a larger size of your nuts, peanut butter or your almond butter. And that way you can be more cost effective.
And I guess for smaller families, they could go in together maybe for that bulk shopping.
Right. Or you can always, you can buy ahead. You can maybe freeze half of it, or you can buy frozen fruits and vegetables. There's a nice large bag of frozen mixed vegetables, and they're organic at Costco. So you have that for a long time, but it's safe because it's frozen, and so.
Okay. So with that, what are signs to look for that indicate poor nutritional habits in children, and what are other signs that show that they're doing well that parents could recognize?
Right. A major sign of poor nutrition is a failure to grow. So if the weight or the height is not appropriate for the age, if they're showing a lack of interaction, if they're irritable, if they're tired, if they're weak, if their skin is pale, or they have dark circles under the eyes. A poor dentition is a pretty common, easy sign to see. Maybe yellow teeth or darkened teeth is a sign. Pale nails as well is a sign. Yeah. And on the other hand, if they're doing well, then they have energy because they're fed, they're happy, they're engaging with others in school, and they look like they have a healthy weight. They're not necessarily chubby. Kids don't have to be chubby, but they have a healthy weight to them.
So let's talk about that for just a second, because in child development, we learn about how children kind of grow out and up and out and up. And that's normal. But sometimes parents get too worried if their child is starting on that out phase that, I need to put them on a diet. What would you say to parents who are thinking along these lines?
Usually the way children's growth pattern goes is, from when they're infants to babies, like till 2, they have those rapid growth spurts, and they're eating frequently. When they're children from about 2 to 5, it slows down a bit. So they're still growing, but it's not so rapid. It's not so constant, and also their appetite is going to go down a little bit. And so that's why you don't need to. They know how much they need to eat. And so you don't need to be concerned if you feed them a big meal and they're not finishing it. They kind of know how much they need. But children are going to constantly grow up until, I would say, once they reach puberty age. That's it. So let's say 10 to 13, maybe 10 to 15 with girls and boys. But at that time, they are going to start putting on more adult weight, and the height is going to increase at a less rapid rate. So they're going to get their adult height a bit later than they get their adult weight. And so this, especially with girls, they may be looking a little chubbier in some areas, but this is not to be a concern because this is normal. They are starting to put on more weight, but this is normal for them and it's healthy for them, for their process. So, you don't want to put pressure, especially on girls, to be dieting at ages, from 10 to 15. It's their normal hormonal process. If they reach, let's say, 16 to 18, they're pretty much done with their, puberty and that kind of thing. That could be a time when you want to start examining their diet habits. Are you maybe having too much soda, maybe too much fast food? Those are the areas I would say, let's cut out those foods. But you don't want to use the word diet for kids and teenagers. They're already under enough pressure themselves between peers and themselves to look good. And you don't want to put that added stress because children themselves, they're going to start doing unhealthy diet habits, and it could get a little tricky.
And unfortunately, our society has used that word in such a way that it no longer has that meaning of how we eat food. It's changed into a negative connotation.
Definitely.
So I have more questions I want to ask you, but at this time I need to take a break for our sponsor. We'll be right back.
Hi, welcome to Adelante. This is Adelante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Adelante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
Welcome back to Muslims and Mental Health. Today we are discussing why nutrition is important with registered nutritionist Shireen Hakim, and we're going to continue our conversation. I wanted to touch base on something that you mentioned earlier. You were talking about, having kids eat all that's on their plate. I mean, sort of, or that's not exactly the way you said it, but it's something similar. And I often get this question because in Islam, we have the idea of not wasting food. And so I think sometimes parents are ambivalent or caught between two places of, well, we're not supposed to waste food, but they can't really eat everything that's on their plate. I mean, and in certain cultural traditions, for example, like when I learned after becoming Muslim, I had spent some time with an Arab family, and every time I would finish, because in my household growing up, we had to finish everything on our plate. And so when I'd finish it, then they would replace it with more food. And it was a cultural tradition, right?
Yeah.
Which I didn't pick up on right away. So after about the third plate, I was like, oh, I can't eat anymore.
Oh, wow.
So there are those traditions, and we have multiple cultural traditions within our community. So how do you help families balance that?
Right.
So they don't feel guilty about, well, we're wasting food, and we just came out of the month of Ramadan, as you know. So it's like, how do you help them with that concept?
Right. Well, and it's true. You do want to instill that good practice with the children, like to value food and not waste it. But adults should remember that children are different than us, and they're smaller than us, so their stomachs are smaller, so they eat less food than we do. So they can't eat the same amount of food that we do, and their portions are definitely smaller, and they get fuller sooner than we do. So let's say you're feeding them for breakfast like a bagel. You wouldn't give them the whole bagel. They could probably eat a half, maybe even a fourth. And if you stick within their portion sizes, then you won't be so worried that they're not eating enough or they're not finishing.
So a little bit about that with portion. Would you recommend with children and teens, or maybe you have different recommendations for those two groups, but a smaller plate?
I would for children, especially young children from between, like 2 to 8. I would say to give them a smaller plate, because it helps you to know how much to give them. And also, it won't overwhelm the child that I have so much food to eat. If they feel like there's too much for them, then they're not going to finish. They'll hardly eat at all, you know. If you give them a big plate, and I actually see this with my niece, she does sometimes get served big portions. She'll eat a few bites and then she wanders off. But if we give her little child's plate and with a little bit of food, or even if she chooses, you know, maybe picks the chicken from the bowl, then she'll eat more. It's more successful.
So is that a good strategy then, to have like maybe the food in the center of the table and have them take as much as they need rather than preparing the plate?
If you feel the child is independent and they eat well, then you can do that. If it's in easy finger foods like, you know, like a chicken legs, or you can have the food there and show them that you're serving them like maybe a small serving of rice, so that they feel that they're involved again. Yeah, definitely. I think that would work.
Okay. Well, that's great. And so what are some of the consequences? We talked about what to look for, but now I want to talk about what are some of the consequences of poor nutrition and what are some of the benefits of good nutrition?
Yeah, there are some common nutritional deficiencies of children. The certain nutrients that kids are commonly deficient in is iron, zinc, vitamin B6, calcium, vitamin A. And when kids are deficient, it can lead to serious health consequences like anemia, bone deformities, nerve damage, blindness. You might see in children poor immunity. They're getting sick a lot. You know, they might have GI issues like constipation, things like that. And so you want to make sure to be providing foods that have those nutrients in them. Like the foods we've mentioned before are high in those.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because with the adolescent population I've encountered, they've seen a lot of acid reflux, which is shocking to me because they're so young.
Right.
But maybe it has to do with the way the diet has evolved in the States. But
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is common. I actually had it for a while. There's a few common traits in our society that are leading to that. One is stress. One is a high diet in foods with acid, like meats and dairy and breads. And then, of course, the sodas and things like that. And the other one is our foods are lower in nutrients now. So there's a higher growth of bacteria, and that can cause that GERD. But it's easy to fix with a good diet. And
Oh, that's good news.
oh yeah.
And so what are some of the positive benefits to good nutrition?
There's an innumerable benefits from a good nutrition. You know, your energy is up, your concentration, your mood, your ability to achieve your goals. You know, you're more motivated, you have more energy. And so nutrition will directly affect that with foods that are high, especially in, you know, omega-3s, because omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. So they help improve things, even inflammatory problems like asthma or arthritis. So this can really improve your quality of life, especially with children. You know, asthma is pretty common with children these days. So, you know.
So what are some examples of like omega-3s? Would that be like salmon?
Right. Yeah. You have fishes like tuna, salmon, codfish, even chia seeds, flaxseed. You know, you can mix it in smoothies, things like that.
Okay. That's really interesting information.
Great.
And in fact, I myself am learning that as we're sitting here because, like, for example, I didn't realize that acid and meat went together. I mean, the obvious ones, we always hear about soda because, you know, it's one of the popular topics, but some of the other things you mentioned, I never put together with acid. So it's really interesting.
Right, great.
So I want to ask you if you know of resources that exist currently in the Muslim community that would assist people who are concerned about getting more help and guidance for their children.
In terms of if there's a situation where people need some nutritional assistance, you can always go to your masjid and ask if they have some sort of assistance program. I know that locally here in Orange County, the ISOC is very proactive in there. They have a food pantry and good resources there. And ICNA also in Southern California is, they have a food basket program.
But what about like nutritional guidance? I mean, those are great for providing food for people who need the actual food. But I mean, just educational guidance around this is what I should be eating. This is not so great for me.
Right.
I mean, you're providing a little bit of that right now.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to come back and watch this. But at the same time, outside of Southern California, do you know, are there any projects or works in motion to address this? I mean, I know that there's been talk, on social media about mindful eating and moving toward that in the Muslim community, trying to eat less meat and just out of the sense of mindfulness toward our food, not because it's halal or haram or anything, but rather just toward considering the environment and the consequences. And so are there any, do you know of any, or, I mean, there might not be because there are many places in our community where we don't have things in place that we need to, but,
Yeah, as far as, from what I've seen in the community, I haven't seen too much. They may sometimes have a talk here and there. I know of some good Muslim nutritionists that have, or fitness experts that have good websites and good, reading materials. But as far as, a community-based program, that might be something we definitely need to work on more and make it something more continuous. So there are Muslim nutritionists now, that are available in all the different communities that we can reach out to. There's a Muslim in dietetics and nutrition group.
Oh, okay.
And we're associated with the American Dietetic Society. So they can always get in touch with that group, and I can provide that information.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right, and that way, wherever people are, they can find a nutritionist or dietitian in their area.
Oh, that would be excellent. Okay, so at this point, I want to transition now to a few fun questions. Before I do that, I want to ask you, is there anything else you wanted to share that maybe we didn't cover at all? Or
I think just what you were asking in the last question brings up a good point in terms of resources. I think, especially nowadays, we might not be able to get the nutrition we need just because of maybe the financial, areas, or maybe, healthy food now is a bit more harder to come by. So I definitely think it'd be great for the Muslim community to help each other and be able to, acquire the, good nutrition and have some programs set up for, even if we just have that knowledge of how to get it, it would make, it would make us so much more successful in our nutrition. So,
yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So, okay, so now I want to transition to a few fun questions that we like to ask all our interviewees.
Okay.
So, who is your Muslim hero, if you have one, and why?
I would say my Muslim hero is Umar ibn al-Khattab, because he was just he seemed he was cool, he was very strong, and I like how he changed himself. Maybe in the beginning he made some mistakes, but then he rose from that, and he was so exemplary. And another thing I read is that he advocated a more meatless diet.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I kind of quoted him. He was saying, it's better to eat less. And so, nutritionally, he's also one of my heroes. So.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so and what is your favorite concept in Islam and why?
There's so many good concepts in Islam. I think I like that the idea that when you pray for someone else, the angels will pray for you. So there's that kind of that concept. It reminds me of like positive vibrations or positive frequency. You're putting something good out for others and it comes back to you. So I like that.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us today. And if you are interested, you're in Southern California and you're looking for a nutritionist, you can contact Shireen Hakim at www.facebook.com/fireworknutrition. This concludes another episode of Muslims and Mental Health. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please contact us at nafshealertherapy@gmail.com. That's NAFSHEALER therapy@gmail.com. Also, please check out our new website. That's an adjunctive resource called nafshealertherapy.wordpress.com. And thank you for tuning in.